Welcome to DejaVue.
Your favorite Vue podcast, you just don't know it yet. Or maybe you forgot about it, have a little deja vu, because this is the Vue.js podcast itself. I am Alexander Lichter. I am a web engineering consultant, do some videos on Nuxt, on Vue, and various other topics around the front-end ecosystem on JS, Nitro, etc., etc. So create some content. I'm also part of the Nuxt.js team. And with me here is Michael Thiessen.
I am a full-time Vue educator, so that means I create courses, write books, give talks, write articles, do podcasts, all sorts of content things around Vue and Nuxt. And we've got a wonderful guest here with us, Daniel Rowe.
Hello, it's nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, thanks for allowing us to have you here. Let's say that way. Thanks for coming all the way over, virtually, of course. But looking also forward to meet you in person at some point again. For everybody not knowing Daniel yet, it's probably like the one or two people on the podcast, maybe like stumbling into the Vue and Nuxt ecosystem. Well, he is the team lead of the Nuxt.js team. All the little PRs coming together from all the amazing contributors. He's reviewing them sometimes. He's writing himself, contributing to all the things. He's an open source maintainer. And yeah, I think there's not much more introduction needed, I would say, right?
Well, I'll definitely take you as a hype man any day. You can.
Happy to be. Yeah, I can be booked for weddings, birthdays, conferences.
It'd be very handy because, there's this whole world of it's an onion, right? So there's the tech world, like the bit of the tech world we're in, which is actually quite a small bit of it. And then even the JavaScript tech world, and then the front end JavaScript tech world, and then the Vue world within that, then the Nuxt world, it's really, you go in. And so, I don't know, people that I know that you sort of encounter constantly online, you bump into them at conferences, and then you meet someone else from a slightly different section of the tech world, and it's like never the twain shall meet. It's totally different. So yes, you should definitely come along and tell my sort of friends and family what I get up to all the time, because I'm not sure they have any real concept that I do anything other than.
How do you do that? If someone asks you, what are you doing as a day job, how would you describe that to people? Maybe to people in tech or to people not in tech?
So I will tell you what I say, but I'm not sure it's very good. You might have a better thing. So I basically say quite sort of gingerly. So I work in tech, I say, and then I look in their eyes to see if there's tech, yes, that's a thing, or if it's more sort of a fear. If there's a fear at that point, I back off very quickly. I tend to mention something like I work in open source, because I feel like that's a concept people might know something about it. They actually very rarely do they. So they're like, well, what does that mean? I said, well, I help maintain a framework that people use to build web apps. A web app is something like Gmail or Facebook, something that's in your browser, but is a lot more interactive than just a site with information on it. And then oh, so what do you charge licenses for that? They say, and that's when it gets a little bit more complicated. I'm like, no, it's free, and immediately people start to have big worries. They're like, right, I see. You're basically the grown-up equivalent of a teenager in his parents' basement. Is that what's going on? It's but that's the sort of conversation that I sort of go into, because I mean, like it or not, most of the people you sort of meet know nothing about TypeScript now, or Vue, and I realize that it's just a horrific thought that that might be the case. But a lot of things I spend a lot of time thinking and doing stuff with are actually not that important in the grand scheme of things.
Oh, I would not agree. I mean, there are so many things to be built. There's so many things that have been built with Nuxt, and I think, without your contribution, Nuxt wouldn't be what it is at the moment, and it would be very different than what it will be in the future as well. So even though like, okay, the grand scheme of things, like the history of mankind, well, I think they're less important people as well, to frame it that way.
Well, I don't want to, and the same goes for you, of course. Both of you, really. I don't know. I think there's things that we all can do to make a difference, like, even if it is to a small community or but it makes it like it's worth it, right? So if you make some people's lives better, that's good. It doesn't have to be like an apocalyptic. I mean, so someone made this point about films recently that slightly getting off topic, but like made this point about films that increasingly the desire for summer blockbuster takes directors away from like everything has to be bigger. So like it used to be, for example, there's this British show called Doctor Who. I don't know if you ever watched it, where like an episode like the Doctor Who is a Time Lord, and the episodes used to be things that were just sort of very local, like a town is threatened, a house is in danger, and he would come and he would save, and that was it. But the modern pull is like, no, it can't be a town that's threatened. It has to be the entire country. And it can't be it must be the entire world. No, it must be the entire universe. No, that's not. It's time itself. It's the fabric of reality. It has to get bigger and bigger and bigger. Whereas actually, to do something meaningful, you don't have to affect everything in the world, and you can feel good about yourself and feel like I've made a difference, and I'm doing something that's worthwhile, even if it is limited in scope to I don't know. I don't know in any way. Like I'm not disagreeing with what you said, but like I think at the same time it is just worth remembering that. That's what I try and tell myself.
I find this a similar struggle with creating content around Vue and Nuxt about like, do I tackle like this big topic about, that everyone is gonna find valuable and everyone is gonna be like, oh yeah, I need to read that. I need to watch that. Or do I just say, well, okay, only a few people are going to have this problem, but the people who do have that problem, they'll really benefit from me showing how I solved it or how I figured out how to do this thing. And maybe 99% of people won't ever encounter this error or this weird situation, but yeah, it's still valuable for those people who do end up finding it.
I think I would even go further and say it's more valuable, like the general things, because you have way more content on the like general level than on the very specific things. I mean, we all, as Daniel already said, with like, okay, we're in a subset of a subset of a subset, and the more you go up again, like abstraction wise, like, okay, from Nuxt to Vue, from Vue to JavaScript, from JavaScript to front end, from front end to programming, maybe, or like web programming in general, you have more and more content. But if you say, oh yeah, I have this specific issue with this certain function, a framework based on another framework provides, like, yeah, the chance, as you said, is very low that people might encounter that. But on the other hand, there is probably literally no content about it except the post you would write, which I think that would be ideal.
Is this a point without a point? But actually, I think it has a point. I think it's sort of come back. And I think what you and Michael just said are absolutely taking us in the right direction. Like, because I think this is about the power of small changes. Because basically this impulse, this blockbuster impulse makes us want to only make huge changes, like huge impact, an amazing whatever, but actually consistently making small changes or putting out content that is relevant for smaller audiences, but doing it regularly and building, and like the power, the positive power of that to impact a much larger number of people really can't be it can't be like it can't be overestimated. Like it's much bigger than you would think. I don't know. Someone tweeted the other day. They were like, "Oh, I wish I could contribute to Nuxt." Actually, it's a friend. It's the guy we know. I think you follow him too. He's like, "Oh, I'd love to get started in open source." It's like, "Yeah, you should contribute." He's like, "Oh, I don't have the skill." And I think the thing I said to him, which I totally agree, is that skill is overrated. So it's not about the sort of huge, like, you won't even understand my code, it's so crazy. It's not about that. It's about small changes that are even a little bit embarrassing because they're so small, but enough of them put together and you genuinely make a difference.
It adds up.
Absolutely.
One of my favorite quotes is from this marketer called Seth Godin, and he says, "A small thing repeated is a big thing." And I think I love like how succinct that is, and how like, yeah, even learning a skill, acquiring a skill is really, if you think about it, just a series of small things that you have to do. Oh, you look up the docs and you figure out what this function does. Then you realize you were using it a little bit wrong and it's actually like this. And then you just like build up on these things over time, and you look back and suddenly you're like, how did I get here? Well, just a bunch of small steps.
It's also like there are so many scenarios where the word works like it. Even left the interest of interest effect, same idea. You have like tiny changes that accumulate over time a lot. And well, in the end, I hope that also maybe encourages one or another saying like, hey, I encountered a specific issue, maybe at work, maybe in a side project, and I fixed it. And maybe there's no content about it at all. So why don't just publish how you fixed it? It can be like, doesn't have to be super elaborate, like 5,000 words blog post. Please don't. Just like very, very rudimentary, like, okay, hey, this is what I did, because probably you're not the only one having that issue, or maybe you were the first one ever, and people will follow after you because they want to try a similar thing. Talking about similar things.
Transition.
Exactly. Well, right now, we already said in the beginning, Daniel, you're the lead of the Nuxt team, and sooner or later, Nuxt has to become, well, like the version has to change to a similar number, trying to rescue the transition here.
I did not know where you were going with that. Currently, you're the lead of the Nuxt team, but sooner or later, and I'm okay. Alex, this is interesting. Okay, go on.
Yeah, like your April Fool's joke, like, oh yeah, what? I remember. Link for that also in the show note, if you missed the tweet from Daniel on that.
I think it was the most gentle April Fool's joke ever. Because at the same time as I tweeted the joke, I also tweeted the fact that it was a joke. I feel like I really didn't want anybody to get worried. But still, people got worried. I feel like I might never make an April Fool's joke again.
Please do.
The internet.
Okay.
But yeah, Nuxt 4 is the big topic. Who knows? Maybe it could be out already when you listen to this podcast, but chances are it might not be. The question is, well, what is Nuxt 4 itself? What changes can we expect? What changes can the users expect as well? And how did it all come together? Can you enlighten us on that?
Well, so Nuxt 4, how did it come about? So Nuxt 4 has almost come about by schedule. So I guess you could imagine that there would be two different approaches to a release. So one approach is, we have all of these things that we need to release, and they're breaking changes. So it looks like we're going to have to do a major release. So that's one. You want to do that. You want to have a set of of things you want to do. They're urgent enough that you need to do a major release, and you decide you're going to do it. We actually took the other approach. That was the approach for Nuxt 3. There were enough changes. We had to do them. We had to do a major release. So and it was driven by this urgency or this need. But in fact, it snowballed with Nuxt 3. So we had Vue 3, we had PostCSS8, we had Webpack 5, we had the release of Vite, we rebuilt the server engine. We basically kept on adding more and more things, each of which, and we felt like, we shouldn't do too many major releases, so we'd better delay the major release until we finished everything we might be possibly breaking change. And that had some issues with it, not least the fact that it was a very chaotic transition for people, and people also trying to keep up with the release candidates, which were themselves often breaking. was not a great experience. So we decided when we post Nuxt 3 release to adopt the opposite approach, or the other approach, which was to plan for releases on a regular basis. So we have and I know you know this, but we have this sort of weekly-ish patch release with any bug fixes that we've handled. So those don't get too long delayed. Every 6 weeks or so, a minor release with any features that are accumulating, and then a yearly or so release with any breaking changes. And the idea is, I guess it's a little bit like meetings with people. If you have a one-to-one with your manager or whatever, you have it every week. So it means that you're never in a situation where you're unsure about when you're going to have an opportunity to bring up something. There's always going to be a bucket to put it in, an opportunity to talk about it, which means that actually it takes a lot of the pressure off the moment. You're like, okay, well, this thing has come up, but it's fine because I've got a meeting in 2 days. I'll just bring it up then. And it's a little bit like that, I think, with releases too. So the PR comes in, you think this is great. It's a breaking change. But that's fine because we have an opportunity to do that in 6 months. So we're just going to park it for now and we're going to pull it out then. And it makes the job of maintenance easier, but I think it also makes the job of using a framework easier too, because you have this sort of expectation. Okay, look, we're expecting new features about every month or so. So we'll just budget in some time. And they shouldn't be too big, because they are regular. So rather than once a year have a heart attack, let's just every month take a few minutes and upgrade and read the release notes. And so that whole sort of time-driven rather than scope-driven approach to releases, I think is serving us well. So it's a really long answer to your question. So what has brought Nuxt 4 release about? Well, honestly, it's the ticking of the clock. It's the fact that we planned in 2024 to release a major version with any breaking changes that we feel we need to make. And there are a host of those, but it's not that they were so urgent that they forced a major release. It's really the other way around. Was that clear at all? I don't know. I felt I rambled.
Makes sense to me. This is the first time I'm hearing this because I'm not part of the Nuxt team. And I think that makes a lot of sense because it definitely does take the pressure off. And even myself as someone outside the project and just doing software development, the more I've done software development, the more wary I've become of upgrades, software upgrades and like everything. And I know other developers like this too, who just like, oh, a new version of macOS came out. Well, I'll wait until next year because I'll wait until all the bug fixes are through. And, and so, because we've been burned too many times in the past by upgrading and, oh, whoops, there were some things that got through or whatever else. And so to me, it seems like less scary in a way to go with that approach of, okay, so there's some breaking changes, but probably less than if you had waited until it was like super urgent. That would be my assumption. I don't know if that's true at all, but yeah, it seems less pressure to upgrade or less scary to upgrade as well.
I mean, I hope so. I think the fact that, my top priority for Nuxt 4 is actually not to ship as much as possible. There are breaking changes that I do want to ship that actually I'm not going to include in Nuxt 4. But my priority is actually to make it a good experience, like to be like, this is an example of what we want our major releases to be like. This is what we want breaking changes to be like. So because right now, honestly, I think partly maybe people's other experiences, but definitely their experiences in Nuxt 2 to 3 mean that the moment people hear that there's a major release, like their fight or flight instincts kick in 100%. And that both of these instincts, that someone opened a PR like an issue, like do not release Nuxt 4.
Indeed.
The other day
Yes.
on Discord, someone was like, maybe you should fix every single issue on the GitHub repo before doing a new release of Nuxt. I'm like, what? what? But like, you understand, like, that might sound quite hostile, but really what's happening is that someone is being triggered because they are remembering how bad it was. I want to reset that memory. So like, I want to reset it so like when people hear that Nuxt 5 is coming up, they'll be like, oh yeah, this is cool. I'm looking forward to taking half a day to, upgrade our project to Nuxt 5, rather than, ooh, horrific. I'm going to have to take 6 months to rewrite the entire app. So like, I want to sort of recalibrate what a major release looks like in the Nuxt ecosystem.
So based on that approach, just saying like, okay, let's make major releases, let's say, not enjoyable, but to some degree maybe enjoyable for people again,
yes,
like less
enjoyable.
frightened. I think let's say that. Let's make major releases enjoyable for people again, especially the Nuxt ones. Also, like I think in general, like what approaches or like what ideas did you consider, or like in the end, which things you will do or you did already to make that happen, to like reduce the being afraid of another major version, besides the whole, okay, let's shift to a time specific thing, let's release once a year breaking changes. Are there like other things that like, okay, this helps reducing the pain, or maybe reduce being afraid of it?
Yeah, I think so. One of the things that that we've been talking about for a while is the idea of flags. So with Nuxt 3, we had the experimental namespace, and in there we gave us a great deal of flexibility to stick in, we'll try this new feature, but it's under an experimental flag, so it doesn't affect people unless they opt into it. And then at some point we enable it by default, and then at some point the option goes away and it's just part of Nuxt. And that worked quite well. I think about 6 months ago, we announced that we were going to have future and features namespaces as well. So we could actually say, it's not that it's experimental, it's more that it's coming and you can opt in early. Or it's now part of the core, and we actually think it should be configurable so you can switch it on and off as you need. And then for Nuxt 4, we had the idea of having a compatibility version. So you could actually run Nuxt 3, but opt in to the breaking changes. And interestingly, we even have like type changes in your project that you can opt into. So you get different types for stuff like the default value of the async data error type, for example. Like, you get the type change flow into your project based on whether you opt for 4 or 3 compatibility version. And I think that hopefully like helps people try it out, see what it's going to be like, see what kind of migration experience they'll have. So I think that's quite good. It's also granular. So everything that we've merged, most things that we've merged, you can switch off. So it was actually your idea, Alex, I'm pretty sure. In the PR implementing this, you're like, hey, can we make this really, really granular?
I remember it actually, yeah. True.
So basically, all of the new features that we're merging, most of them, they either have a migration guide. Well, they should all have migration guides if that's applicable. They'll have, like, here's how you switch it off if you want to revert to the previous behavior. And like here, we expect that this is like a big, has big impact or like a very small impact on your app. And so we're sort of documenting those on Nuxt.com as we go. And so I think all of that should help quite a lot. I'm getting lots of really good anecdotal commentary from people who are saying stuff like their app is faster, which will probably be to do with stuff we're able to do with file system watchers, with the new directory structure, and other stuff too, which is really nice to hear. But I think it's in the days now after the release of 3.12. Who knows when you're listening to this, but it's like in this sort of post-release period where more people will start to try it out, that we'll see, like, are there things we missed, things we could have made, put in to make it better. And hopefully that means that by the time we release 4, we've had a sort of gradual people trying it out, people encountering issues or not, and the chance for us to adapt before we say, hey, 4 is out, time to switch.
So this granular system for different features, is that if I have a Nuxt 3 app right now, I can opt in to different features and first test to see, okay, do I need to fix anything? Is that to sort of bridge between Nuxt 3 and Nuxt 4, or maybe it's both of these, that people can sort of beta test these things in their Nuxt 3 apps before Nuxt 4 comes out? Or is it one or the other, or like a combination of those?
I think for me, so some of the changes are to defaults. And so for example, the directory structure, it changes the default value. But that's always going to be configurable. So Nuxt 4 is never going to stop you from doing what you do now. You can opt back. And even some of the stuff that I would really urge people they don't change, like the default reactivity of use async data. We're changing it to be shallow reactive, which is much more performant, and in almost all cases is what people really want. I would really say don't change the default value of that, but they could if they wanted to. So that there are things that are configurable, and so you can opt in early, and it is a bit of a bridge type situation. But then there are other changes where we're, it's going to be a change. We're not going to be maintaining testing infrastructure to test both scenarios. One of the most difficult things actually about the release of 3.12 and in general is that we are testing a vast amount of stuff right now. We're testing, all of our tests are running in both version 3 and in version 4 compat mode. So, which is maybe reassuring for people to know that our test fixtures, without any changes to them, are working in both 3 and 4 mode. Like we're testing both. And we also have a matrix of a whole raft of other things that people might configure their app in. And I don't want that, as time goes on, to just grow infinitely. Yeah. Like in terms of some of these things, we do want to say like, okay, this is now the configuration. And yes, it was a breaking change, but we hope the migration path is straightforward. And so there are some of those too. So it's a chance for people to detect it. In most cases, changing their code to adapt is a one line or a couple line change. So it's not. I'm not talking rewriting apps. I'm talking about small code mods. There is some really interesting work actually on the code mod front.
Maybe before we talk about what's happening with Codemods around, could you just briefly summarize what Codemods are for the people that maybe never touched a code mod, never heard about it?
So I guess a code mod, the idea is it's something automated that changes your code base. So that might be something like, so at the very simple level, it might be sort of for the new directory structure for Nuxt, it just moves some folders and files around. But it might be something that's, and this is typically, I think, what people think when they say code mod, it might be something that's syntax aware. So it's aware of, like, you're calling this function and you're getting this value back. So we're going to change the name of that value, or we're going to insert another line of code that manipulates it somehow. And so the idea is you run a code mod and then you look at your Git diff and you see like this stuff has changed in my code base that I would have had to go through and do manually, but this tool has done it for me. So for example, as part of the transition from Vue 2 to Vue 3, a few people wrote code mods to change options API to composition API. There were a few projects that were around. Or you might find that there are, there's other kinds of code mods around. Valabot recently released a new API, and there's a code mod for Valabot to update old versions to new versions. Check out codemod.com, by the way. They're doing really cool stuff in terms of, they have a vision, I think, to be a sort of universal registry of code mods and sort of updating package versions. You sort of run a CLI tool and get the benefits of that. So which is, I think, pretty exciting.
Really cool.
But yeah, so the idea is mostly for Nuxt, we would want changes to be quite small that would be needed One, they probably wouldn't be needed at all. And two, if they are needed, that they would be small changes rather than big ones. I've moved my inside over. I did that this morning after the release of 3.12. The diff is basically just me moving files into different folders. That's all I did. And I wouldn't have had to do that, but I felt I'm going to be vanilla out of the box and see what that feels like. Sebastian dropped me a line. He migrated a project across, and actually he really scared me. He's like, "Oh no, Daniel, I am sorry." And I was on the edge of my seat. Oh no, Sebastian, what's happened? Because he was giving a talk in Code Europe, and he said he wanted to do it on the latest version of Nuxt. So I released 3.12, making sure to give him half an hour before his talk to be able to use the latest version. And he's like, Daniel, I am so, and I don't know. I was thinking, oh, this is the worst thing in the world. He's live coded something on stage using the just released version of Nuxt, and there's some edge case that's bit him. And then he said, this is too easy. Since when do we have such easy migrations? And sent me a diff of the migration, which was literally removing 2 lines of code in his Nuxt config and adding a comment and another line of code that enabled the compatibility version. So it was the best possible migration that I could have seen. Like, that's what I want to see. Like, I want people. So even Nuxt 4 compat mode will look at your project and be like, okay, what's your structure? Is it following Nuxt 3 or is it following Nuxt 4? Okay, it's following Nuxt 3. Great, we know what to do. We're going to handle this like we did in Nuxt 3. So, stuff should just work in 4. That's the aim. I'm hoping that most people won't need to change anything.
So it's like, it should be really frictionless in the end. Even if you don't, like, let's say, adapt to the new folder structure that comes with Nuxt 4 by default.
There are good reasons for the folder structure, which is obviously why we're changing them. So it is more performant to have a source folder rather than place all of your source files at the root of your repo. Not least, they're not so much because of Nuxt itself, because of tools we use under the hood, like file system watchers. So Chocodar, for example, when you watch a directory, it has to crawl every single subdirectory. It is an architectural limitation of Chocodar itself. And that means if you're crawling .git and node modules, you will have performance issues when you start your server. More so on, so macOS actually it tends to be fine because it doesn't have to iterate. But on Windows, goodness me, you will experience like a long delay, particularly as your project grows. There's nothing to do with your project code, but it's just to do with the fact that this is how the file system watching implementation works. And so simply by creating a separate source directory, we just opt out of that. And so there are good reasons. This is not a stylistic. It's not a stylistic change, but hopefully it's a nice performance improvement. So anyway, yes, people can use whatever they want, but certainly I would suggest people check why we've made the change, because they might prefer to have the new folder structure when they know what it means.
It's also documented, I guess, in the migration guide or like the Nuxt 4 part, why the change was made in the end.
I hope it is, yeah.
Otherwise, when you're listening to that, it will be.
Exactly.
What other features are coming in Nuxt 4 that we can all look forward to?
Well, so this has been one of the things that I've been saying, that Nuxt 4 isn't bringing features any more than any other minor release. So in 3.12, we shipped like lots of features. And actually, there's no reason I would delay a feature for Nuxt 4 other than, if it's time to release 4 and we have a feature, it's going in Nuxt 4. So mostly Nuxt 4 is just about the breaking changes. So I know I wish I had a different answer in a way. I wish I could say Nuxt 4. Oh, it's the best and the most amazing Nuxt, but we're doing our best to ship the amazing stuff on a monthly basis, not on a yearly basis. So I can tell you about some of the things I am excited about, though. So I'm excited about incremental builds, where we don't rebuild your code if it hasn't changed. I'm excited about multi-app, where we have sort of two module federation approaches, one which allows you to federate Nuxt apps as separate apps, and one which actually allows you to embed them, just parts of them. Like you could use a component from one app in another app, or a page like as a root in another app, without needing to like even on the same, like in the same app. So you sort of click, hey, this link, if you click this link, it's going to load the page from this other app, but it's going to be seamless from your point of view. It's still going to work using your existing routing structure. So stuff like that. I'm excited about that. I think that's cool. It probably won't affect most people because multi-app approaches are not actually the best choice for the vast majority of teams. But it's a fun engineering challenge, and I think it will be really helpful for the enterprises that do need and use it. Some other stuff that I'm excited about. I'm excited about separating. So build directories are going to be separated out based on production and development, which is going to enable you to, say, build your app while you're running the dev server and not have any issues in terms of types or anything being interrupted. Once we've transitioned to 4, the change we've made with file system watchers is going to enable us to experiment with some really interesting stuff. I think some more performance stuff in terms of focusing on improving the speed of your startup. Something we did ship, and actually I forgot to add to the release notes of Nuxt 3.12, is Compatibility Date. Different from Compatibility Version, which is just about a major version, Compatibility Date is about specifying a behavior set for most often presets, like Nitro presets or Nuxt image presets. Because you have providers, but then those providers change their implementation in a way which doesn't really work well with Semver. So for example, if you have Cloudflare pages and they have a new implementation, or Cloudinary, or Vercel image, or something, that like we can't, just because they change their implementation, we shouldn't be creating new majors of Nuxt image and NitroPack all the time. And so Compatibility Date is a way of handling that and saying, like, you can freeze the implementation of, say, this provider's solution without having to manage that in the Semver of Nuxt or Nuxt image. And that is something that we are going to, and we're also thinking that will help us with things like runtimes. And that's something that in a new version of Nuxy, we're going to actually add to your Nuxt, or prompt, do you want to add it to your Nuxt config? And you basically get like a frozen compatibility date, which you can update at any time. And we're creating tooling that will show you, like, hey, these are the new features or changes if you want to update your compatibility date. And you can also do it on a per provider basis rather than just one date. So that is an interesting set of features that are going to be enabled by that, and will make, hopefully, the whole release cycle a lot better, because it will mean that, say, when Nitro needs to release a new version of, I don't know, AWS Lambda, we don't have to say, oh no, we can't release it until Nitro has a major. We can actually say, well, it's fine, we'll release it, but we have a compatibility date constraint that people have to opt into the new date to get the new feature. And that should make people's experience also a lot smoother too, because if they have a fixed compatibility date, even when they update to new versions, they're going to get a guarantee of behavior, which is what you want, right? You don't want stuff changing unexpectedly on you.
So the compatibility date, I also think that might help, and like it might help the users a lot in terms of, like, you don't have to wait for another major or like have to patch the package yourself if you want new behavior. But will it also make it more difficult for maintainers to decide, okay, what should go into, let's say, a minor or a major at some point versus what belongs to a new compatibility date, and also how to maintain all the previous, let's say, compatibility date behaviors side by side?
Yeah. So from my point of view, it's not going to cover, compatibility date isn't going to cover Nuxt behavior. So it's not, because yes, that would be, I think as far as Nuxt behavior is concerned, we have Semver for that. Compatibility date is going to be for stuff like presets, or so in other words, for example, if you have Nuxt image, which has 20 plus different image providers, and some of them are changing their behavior. So that's what it's going to be. So we're not going to be changing Nuxt behavior based on compatibility date. I think that's the first thing that, as far as I'm planning, we won't be. And I think that's also true of NitroPack. So again, it's the presets under the hood, and it's basically trying to figure out how to version stuff that you can't version with Semver. And so I think that, there are some providers which do this, like Cloudflare has their Wrangler toml, which has a compatibility date concept. Sanity, for example, is a CMS. You can have a compatibility date, and lots of APIs. GitHub API has a compatibility date. And so you can sort of specify, like, I don't want behavior changing from here. And that means that the test will never be about Nuxt, because these things won't necessarily interact. The test will be like Nuxt image will have 2 different providers for something, and it will have a test for each of them. And you can opt into one or the other based on your compatibility. So hopefully it's not going to add testing burden. The last thing I want is, and this is one of my, it's a concern that I've shared as we've been figuring out how to do this. I don't want to create something which is less maintainable. Like I don't want, like, I believe in testing and testing fully. I'm a member of the 100% test coverage camp. That's what I would want to go for. And I know a lot of people say you shouldn't try for it, but I want to get that. It doesn't guarantee stuff. It's not the answer, right? But it is a good thing if you can do it. And so I don't want to make that complex, too complex. I don't want to have too many forks and too many matrices and running in the test suites. So that is not what I see compatibility date doing for us. I see that as a way of versioning providers that change outside of our control.
I think that's very interesting. It might be, I think, the challenge besides the maintenance and also making sure, like, when to deprecate certain compatibility date levels or like dates, when to remove them. I think besides that, also educating the people on the topic of, like, okay, you have the Nuxt version, you technically also have like underlying maybe a Nitro version or like an OFetch version, you have a Vue version, and now you also have the compatibility date that basically also spreads around maybe some modules, some packages, Nuxt and Nitro, and how these all belong together.
Yeah.
It might not be easy, but I think it's doable. It's just like, it's one more thing, let's say, to consider. But also, as you said, like, okay, it's more provider specific things, and it's not really behavior of a package of like Nuxt or Nitro or Nuxt image. It's more like, as you said, the provider's changing. I think with that, it's already like giving people a sense of like security, as in like a sense of safety. As in, when I want more or different provider changes or updates to a preset, I change the compatibility date. Otherwise I don't have to.
Yeah, I think so. I would say that, when we do release it, I would say, hey, fix the compatibility date at the current day, and then when you run Nuxy upgrade, the aim is we'll say, hey, okay, you're upgrading Nuxt. There are some new features or some new behaviors for these providers. Do you want to update your compatibility date? And so, like, basically, it's a sort of slightly separate channel for updates. Anyway, this is very much work in progress. So this is not something we're shouting about right now. This is not something that even will have any effect. If you set your compatibility date, it's not going to do anything. But I think we have an opportunity to do some useful and cool stuff with it in the time ahead.
Definitely. Totally agree.
Yeah, so maybe we can go a little bit further back before Nuxt and Vue and talk a bit about how you got into this whole programming web development thing in the first place. So where did that start for you? What did that look like?
So programming. So basically, we had a computer growing up. I don't know, I'm of the age where those sorts of computers were sort of quite old, and I remember going to a friend's house and like there was a turbo button on the computer, so you could press the turbo, and I don't know what it did, but like there was a turbo button. I feel like that dates me.
I remember those buttons.
Yeah. Windows 3.11. Goodness me.
No idea what you're talking about, folks.
So like I remember QBasic. So like trying to build like games in QBasic, and friends would be like, okay, so it's like go to this line and like ask like prompt a question, like if they do this, then go to this other part of the code, and terrible experience in some ways. Like it's just this really, really long file with like go to line number to change the flow. Like it would be very frustrating. But you could build some cool stuff. That was fun. And the idea of being able to think of something and make it happen. So I think that was my first experience with programming. And then I bought a book, Teach Yourself Visual Basic in 31 Days, and taught myself how to code in Visual Basic, which again, you could make stuff that ran on your desktop. I made some stuff. Like I don't know, probably about 13. And I remember I made like a password stealing app that would steal. The idea was it would steal my parents' or my sister's password for the computer. So like it basically pretended to be Windows. So like it had like a login dialog and like a desktop. And so you'd click, you'd think it was the login, and you'd click and you type in password. And what it would do is it would like say sort of wrong password, and then it would disappear. So then you would be confronted with the actual Windows login, and you would try it again and it would work. So, but behind the scenes, it would, collect it for me. Like there was
sneaky.
I know. I built like a time tracking app for my dad. Like I built like a little, and on the sneaky side as well, I had like a reset app. So like I could press a keyboard shortcut, and it would like reset my desktop to like the homework I was meant to be doing. That was quite a handy app. And yeah, I don't know, like it was fun. Like you could build stuff and hook up logic and just like draw buttons around and click them, and they did stuff. And so that was and then I don't know, hacking around with PHP and WordPress and trying to make a website do and look the way you wanted it to look. So I don't know, I did lots of that kind of stuff. Just it's like just for fun. I did one freelance job for a Chinese fashion company that was coming to New York to do a fashion show, and they were a client of my dad's, and they hired me to build them a website, and I was very proud of it. I think I made it Macromedia Dreamweaver, and it was beautiful. I can't find it anywhere. Like I've looked in the Wayback Machine and whatever, and it's just not there. But I remember it being gorgeous. I mean, it was like image map. It was like an image, and then like image maps, and like you hovered over and stuff happened. But very different, outdated tech from today's world.
The hot stuff back then.
But absolutely, that's right. And yeah.
Sweet. And then how did you make the contact over to the Vue World, let's say?
So I was, fast forward quite a few years, and I had a small creative agency. We were focusing on clarity of message. So thinking about how to express what a business was uniquely good at simply. So what was the essential point? And we were, alongside helping businesses think about what their brand was, that would be it, like what you're about. We would also help them implement that brand. So think about things like branding, sort of graphics, images, colors, fonts, and then create stuff like a website. And so we were doing that in WordPress, in Laravel, and I think through Laracasts, because even in the WordPress world, I really thought I regarded Laravel as sort of, this is good, like a dependency management through code rather than through clicking buttons in a dashboard and randomly downloading zip files and running them on your server. Like,
Yeah.
it feels like doing this through code is a better way. So sort of was very much looking to the Laravel ecosystem, and I came across a course on Laracast's Jeffrey Way teaching Vue, and I don't know, I love Jeffrey Way. He's fantastic. That voice and the sort of simple video of just a IDE, and that was perfect for me. And so he was teaching Vue, and like this is Vue. This is how it works. And the idea of an app that was reactive, like that allowed you to declare how your data affects the view you get on the web page, and then have that declaration generate your UI. So as the data changes, the UI changes. You're not going around hitting document query selector. You're not sort of thinking about the jQuery model of I'm going to go into that page and do stuff to it. You're thinking more about how do I define relationships. It was a really amazing concept. Really changed my mind about what websites could look and feel like, because at this point you're building apps again. Now this isn't just a website that's sort of displaying data and you click a button and that goes back to the server and makes the database query. No, you're building something which is much more present for the user, much better experience if you're using it. You have something which happens instantly, and so that was amazing. We basically pretty much immediately transitioned over to use Vue, either as a front end for a WordPress backend or just as a full app. I remember sort of telling my lead coder that we were just to scrap the WordPress site he was starting to build. We were going to build this one in Nuxt. And so that was the sort of the beginning of the transition for me, I guess.
That was back to in Nuxt 2 times, I would assume.
It was yes, it was Nuxt 2.
I mean, it can't be Nuxt 3 because, well,
there's some time difficulties, paradoxes in that case.
Time traveler Daniel here. Okay, busted clearly. And just to double check, like you never like formally learned to program, right?
No. So my degree was law, so I studied arguing, it was jurisprudence, so theoretical law, and then I also studied theology, but never once. So I think I might have also had a course, introduction to programming or something like that in school, but it was C++, and it was or computer science maybe, but that was in school, not at university. That was alongside maths and physics and writing and lots of other stuff. Obviously, Alex, you're sort of you've just finished a dissertation. You have like a proper degree in everything in this. Michael,
don't have the degree yet,
you as well? Not yet, no.
Bureaucratic hurdles. I don't want to get into it, but it will come soon. So the head it's not very visible. It's somewhere up there on top of the Nuxt 3 thingy. Next time we'll be we'll be there for a reason.
So soon.
Okay.
I have a degree in CS as well. Not a master's or anything. My school was, so some schools that I've seen do both computer science and software engineering. So one is like more math focused. The other one is more like practical software development skills focused. But mine was sort of like a 50-50 blend. So I did a class on programming languages, but I also did calculus, and never once have I used calculus in programming. So I don't know why that was in there, but I learned it.
Never formally verified if a program works or not.
I loved calculus.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing. I wouldn't really know how to integrate it with programming, but calculus, it was so much fun.
I had a limit of how many math courses math and science courses I could take in my degree. And so I wish I could have taken more. And that's all I'll say.
I'd say the average computer science student would probably say, I would love to take just less of it. At least I remember my uni jobs were like, oh, math, so difficult. I mean, like, also, I enjoyed it in a way. Never had the best grades, in at least in math courses, but I was also just a bit lazy with learning sometimes, which, well, somehow it still worked out, I guess. But it's super interesting because of like the all like algebra and like theory behind it, like set theory as well. It all helps subconsciously, like understanding certain logic constraints. I mean, you can even map that to like certain things in reality, but even just knowing, okay, this is a thing, like doing that and understanding the thoughts behind it even can help without like consciously realizing.
And I think a lot of it is logic as well, right? So like thinking about just thinking critically and rigorously. I mean, it's easy for me to say this as someone who doesn't have a computer science degree. But I feel like a lot of the challenge that most people face when coding is just that computers do what you tell them to do. And that is a problem because we are not necessarily very precise when we tell people, when we express what we want. So we can express what we want, and we have this new language we can use called JavaScript, and we express what we want, and it doesn't do what we want to achieve. And the problem is almost always we weren't precise or clear enough, or we failed to take account of some consideration, right? So like, and so those are in a way easy problems once, because it's just about thinking. That's what's going to hopefully reduce the bugs. I say this as someone who creates bugs all the time, by the way. Like, I'm not, but like I feel like it's that thinking thing is a very accessible skill, because it's not like a hidden secret that you can't learn. Like it's just something you can get better at.
I think it definitely is a lot about, like, programming is a lot about thinking clearly. Same thing with writing, by the way, which I found there's a lot of transference between the two that I found. And yeah, you can learn how to think clearly in a lot of different ways, like taking philosophy courses or math, or there's lots of people who get physics degrees or engineering degrees and go on to do software development or study law, or I mean, you don't have to study anything formally. You can just, pick it up as you go. I think there is value in a degree, but it's, for myself at least, it's like the other things that it forced me to do, like time management and and being disciplined. That's where the value is. And so it's like there's often, I don't know if a debate is the right word, but like sometimes people who don't have a CS degree feel insecure maybe, or feel like they can't apply for certain jobs, or that their skills aren't valued. And I think that that's dumb because I know some really great developers, like yourself included, who didn't learn formally. And
I also know the other way around, with people like having a degree and don't know how to program at all, because, well, the university doesn't teach you programming necessarily. You have to do it, like practically you have to work on a project. So yeah, I don't think that's the best indicator of like coding skills. But of course, all the things I said, like time management, discipline, learning how to learn, and so on, like putting oneself through like a whole university course is an achievement for sure. It just doesn't say much about programming skills.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say I was that great at studying at university. As in, I think I probably didn't study any more than 2 days a week. And I think probably if I went back and did it again, I would be maybe, I don't know, a lot more efficient. I think I feel I've learned things since. I mean, I didn't do too badly, but yeah, I think there were a lot of useful, a lot of fun things and good things that came out of it.
That's for sure. So now we almost did a full circle. Like you said, you after not studying computer science, but having 2 other degrees, which is pretty amazing. And then starting to build, not with WordPress anymore, not with Laravel, but with Vue and with Nuxt, to Nuxt 2 times. Well, then you were one of us, the Nuxt developer. So what happened? So you eventually became the lead of the Nuxt.js team, or maybe before that you probably, well, not probably, we all know that, but joined the core team of Nuxt. So how did it happen? It probably wasn't just like random, like, hey Daniel, you're here, we're here, join the cult.
Well, it was basically that. So I mean,
no, no way.
So basically, so I had discovered Nuxt and still had my company. We pivoted into software as a service because we one of our clients needed an app, and so we built it for them. But actually, I really believed in their vision and what they wanted to do, and so I ended up acquiring them. So we did a lot of work for them, and we basically bought their IP, and it sort of pivoted into software as a service because I liked the idea of having a team that could build something that could scale, and so that was really, really great, really exciting. And we were doing more and more with Nuxt, and so I started helping out. We were deploying to Vercel, for example, and I was helping triage and create bug fixes for the Nuxt Vercel builder. It used to be Now Builder, mind you. These were the days. It used to be you could deploy a Docker image to Vercel. That was deprecated at some point. It was a hard thing when that happened. Threw me into a great deal of trouble at the time. But yes, just started helping out. And there was this other guy, Pi Zero. Didn't really know who he was. But he seemed to be very sort of doing lots of stuff as well. And so I didn't even realize that he was sort of on the. Anyway, you're just from the outside, you're just seeing people and collaborating, and it was a lot of fun. Something that I really enjoyed doing. When my and then I started contributing more to Nuxt as well. And I guess when I decided to wrap up the company, so my co-founder and I had a slightly different idea about how to go forward, and it was sort of COVID times, and we felt it was probably best to wrap things up, not in a bad way. And so we shut things down, and I thought I would take a little a month or so and figure out what was next for me. Partly because I had no background at all in tech. So, this is something I did. I did it myself. So it's not like I wasn't going into something where I could say, oh, now I know how tech works because I've been working at a company and I have colleagues and sort of like, no, it was my company. So I had nobody to learn from. I'd never been to any conferences. I had one or two online over COVID. And so I didn't really, I thought I would try and dust off the CV and try and figure out what's next. But Sebastian, when he found out that I had stopped my company, he's like, hey, can we sponsor you to work on Nuxt? And I was basically really, really honored that he would ask. So I was really delighted to do that. And so I sort of tore up the CV and started building Nuxt 3. So that was the thing. It was basically a knock on the shoulder and, hey, come join us.
But after being around for a long time, after contributing for quite a bit, so that's the important part there as well.
It was basic.
It was not just like
exactly. So it was what I was doing already, but without the need now to go and find a job to enable it, which is pretty cool.
Very nice. And here we are. Exactly.
So are you still primarily funded by that sponsorship?
Yes, probably. So I have a sponsor. I've tried to specify. I think it's the majority of my sponsorship is from Nuxt Labs. Although I do also have sponsorship from others. and other companies as well, like FormKit were a generous sponsor. Sanity, for example. There are some others on my website that I mentioned. Evan sponsors me. So a number of folk. Henko.
And of course, quite some individuals as well, like some developers too.
Yeah, absolutely. That's true. So I basically have sort of individual sponsorships. In some cases, I have retainers, which retainers I don't typically think of as a sponsorship, but it's a little bit more sort of project focused. And then I do a very, very small amount of consultancy on the sort of by the hour type of thing. But really, I don't have a lot of time to do that. And so I'm very, very grateful for sponsorships because they mean that I don't have to. And I can focus on, what I enjoy doing, which is maintaining Nuxt and helping as best as I can.
Open source.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It seems like most of the Vue ecosystem is actually like true open source, where you are sponsored by Nuxt Labs, which is a company, but at the same time, you aren't a free agent. You're still independent. And Evan is independent. He gets sponsorships and other things. And so it is interesting how that works. And yeah, it's nice to see that this whole like open source thing, like it can work. It's not just like a pipe dream of, people just contributing in their spare time, but that there can be folks who lead it that are independent.
So speaking like just very much personally, the fact that there is this independence is very, very important to me. So if I weren't independent, I would probably be doing something else, because the thing that I value about open source is that it is like free will. So it's a sort of something that I do because I enjoy it and I want to help people. The moment that it stops being that, so the moment that I start being, I don't know, having KPIs and, I might as well do something else that has KPI. I might as well do something else that is and is also better paid. It becomes a different kind of thing at that point. So the fact that I think you can bring a sort of things can be genuine and open and straightforward. I don't like the idea of hidden motives and people who have agendas that are not entirely disclosed, or even the suggestion that might be the case. So independence is good, and I like that.
I mean, the three of us all running, well, either being solo self open source maintainers like Daniel, running their own businesses like Michael and me, like I think we all value our independence as well to a big part. And I think also, like in your case, Daniel, it's really nice that you have the opportunity to do exactly what you would like to do while not worrying about, how to pay the bills, because thanks to the sponsorship that's done. Because otherwise, as you said, then you would do more consultancy, you would have less time for open source, and it would be like a means to an end because, well, you have to live for something too.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's always difficult to know exactly what things would look like. But yes, I think I just feel very fortunate. I do also think, things like this also do somehow make you unemployable in a way, because half of the thing that I enjoy about having my own business previously, for example, and also about being involved in an open source project like Nuxt, is the breadth of what you get to do and the impact that you can have on people, that you can actually have a big picture perspective. Think about yourself being able to write code and then teach people about how to use it. There are lots of different avenues that you can be different ways you can be applying your mind and inclination. So you're not sort of stuck in a very narrow space. You're in quite a broad space. And I quite enjoy that, even if it's a little bit different. So like, a lot of issue triage, sort of thinking about where to take things in terms of framework, sort of building features, yes. Reviewing people's PRs and seeing their PRs get better and better. Giving talks, there's lots of different things that it feels like don't fit very well in any one box. And having the ability to do all of that is a lot of fun.
I completely agree, because like any given week, I'm writing code and writing articles, and I do marketing and sales for the courses that I've got to do to support myself, and I get to record podcasts and talk with interesting people that I like to hang out with, and like even the code part is, while at my previous job I was, the best place to put me was just writing Vue on the front end, because that was what I was really good at. But with my own stuff, well, I get to mess around with database schemas and try and figure out how do I, improve this deploy and fix other things. And it's like a wider breadth of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you also have to, in a way. Like, otherwise you would hire someone to do it. But other than that, like, okay, you learn, you get into that and play around with things you would maybe never touch otherwise, because then you're like that hyper-focused specialist. Like, okay, I'm good in that tiny niche of the other tiny niche, and so on.
Yeah.
Like we discussed in the beginning. So really a really good thing for learning. And also, like, once again, the independence and freedom of choosing what to do, because you don't have to like always be super efficient, as in like I have to make every hour count, because otherwise I don't know, I would get my salary, I would get a demotion, or I would be rated badly compared to coworkers. Is also a big thing where the pressure is really reduced.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think on that note, it's sounds almost like a good time to wrap up. We have like still a few things when it comes to like Nuxt 2 to Nuxt 3, the whole story around that, but maybe that's even good for another episode, as we're already quite good in time as well.
Mm-hmm.
So Daniel, would you like to come on for another episode again?
Oh, absolutely.
A few more
this
things?
Is so much fun. Yeah, anytime. But next time we have to get together in person, right? It's like,
that would be cool. Yeah, I would love that.
We'll have to figure that out.
Definitely. There's one last question though, because I know lots of people are interested in that. So before we fully wrap up, I have to ask that, just because otherwise the Nuxt 4 people looking forward to the framework, to the new major version of the framework, also to the framework itself, they would be like, why you didn't ask that, Michael, Alex, why you didn't do it? So we talked about all the tiny breaking changes here and there, like make it frictionless, make it like less effort for the people. Ideally, almost no effort, as you said with Sebastian's 3 or like 2 lines of code change. When, Daniel? When? That's the big question.
So the big thing for Nuxt 4 right now is the UnJS ecosystem. So almost all of the changes that we'll make on the Nuxt specific end have been made. So you can install Nuxt 3.12 and opt into compatibility version 4, and almost everything is there. So you basically almost have Nuxt 4. The changes that we still have are things like a NitroPack major release, and some other things like that. And Puya is working incredibly hard on that. And hopefully I'm going to be able to help as well. It shouldn't just be up to one person, but like there's a lot to be done. So originally we said the 16th of June. It's seeming unlikely that that's the case. I think it is likely, though, that it will be before the end of June. We shouldn't be too far delayed, particularly because we have 3.12. So as long as people test it, find issues with it, let us know how it goes, then I think we'll be good to go when we have the new Nitro release.
Perfect. I think that's the best estimate we could have. I mean, pinpointing down to a certain date is always difficult anyway.
Yep.
I mean, we also don't do this with major versions. We just say, hey, once a year, right?
Yeah.
So that makes totally sense. And I think that's also a good, a good instruction for the people listening. Like, hey, you want Nuxt 4? Just take 3.12, test it, opt into the breaking changes, and if your app works, that's pretty amazing. If it doesn't work, which is very unlikely, but could be, well, either change your code, fix things, your super quirky cool modules, or report a bug if it's a bug.
Yeah, pretty
Great.
much.
Then last but not least, Daniel, where can people follow you? Where can people follow your projects? Is there anything you want to share with the audience? Anything where is particular, like, hey, you have to check that out, besides Nuxt itself, of course.
So I have a website to check that out. That's roe.dev. And you can contact me that way. So I have all my social links on Twitter. I'm Daniel C. Rowe, on GitHub, Daniel Rowe. Let's see. Projects. I think the main thing so I could mention, let's see. I released my newest sort of app type thing is page speed. So page-speed.dev. You can check out the speed of your website and share it on social media. And it's just queries the page speed insights API and the Google Core Web Vitals API. So that's something I was pretty enjoyed building. I'm also planning on creating a course on teaching React developers about Nuxt. And if you go to reacttonuxt.com, you can sign up for that. So that's something I'm going to be emailing people soon to ask to try and get a cohort of early adopter React people who can be there with me as I record and create some content introducing Nuxt to the React world.
So send it all to your React friends, maybe colleagues from other departments. Be like, hey, that's your chance to learn Vue Nuxt easily.
Exactly.
Very cool.
Yeah, I'd love to get you on if you want. You should do a collab.
Yeah, absolutely. Would love to. So let's definitely go further on that. And of course, all links Daniel just mentioned, they will be all collected by us, put in the show notes as well. So if you just like note it down on a paper, because like, oh my God, yeah, perfect for my colleague, he needs that course, gets into Vue Nuxt. Well, then no worries, just take a look as usual. So yeah, Daniel, thank you so much for enlightening us all around Nuxt for your journey being an open source maintainer, and we're looking forward to Nuxt 4 and having you on another time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And for everyone out there, of course, don't forget to check out later, like older episodes. We have a few more in stock, super interesting, from people building amazing things in the open source community, like Daniel's doing, to people like using Vue and Nuxt every day in the industry, building amazing applications through game developers and so on. So have a look there as well. And of course, tune in for next week's episode as well. Releases are every Thursday, depending on your time zone, of course, maybe a little bit delayed, but anyway, every week a new episode. So thank you everybody for listening to DejaVue, and talk to you soon.